right. Everybody ready?
Ready.
Good morning.
Morning.
Okay, so it is January 7th. Happy New Year, everybody. I think this is the first time we've all seen, well, you guys have seen each other in the office, but.
Sorry.
Good morning. It's January 7th. It is 9 o'clock, and we are starting our work session, our special meeting. Ms. Wood, would you call to order, please?
Mr. Brown?
Here.
Mr. Norris?
Here.
Mr. Schwartz?
Here.
Dr. Shank?
Here.
Ms. Upchurch?
Here. And let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Norris. Thank you. And for those that are not with us this morning, to view this meeting's presentations, documents, please access Board Docs. The link to the Board Docs website can be found via the D38 website, www.lewispalmer.org, on the Board of Education meetings webpage. And to view the live stream video of this meeting, please go to the Lewis Palmer School District 38 YouTube page. Jumping right into B1, Priority 3, Valuing Our People. This is at our board's request for a follow-up of our December 3rd meeting, work session presentation. And Ms. Welch, you, I believe, have the floor.
Sounds great. Good morning. It's good to see everyone. So there were a couple of topics that were requested that I look into a little deeper or provide more information on. One of them was the by-question comparison of the fall 2023 and 2024 survey results for the employee satisfaction survey. If you look at page 3 of the document I've provided, the questions that the employees answered are listed there. So there were a total of 20 questions. You can also see what the fall of 2023 mean score was for each of those questions, as well as the fall 2024 mean score, as well as the delta. Yes, Ron?
Morning.
Morning.
Thank you for this diligence, by the way.
Of course.
Can you frame up what the numbers mean? In other words, for example, on fall 2023, on number 1, 3.76 versus 3.80, is that on a 5 scale?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's a 5 scale. Yes, 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest.
Okay, and so therefore, 4 500ths, is that considered irrelevant?
I would say it's not as relevant as it may look here, but it matters to us, and we try to take the data and figure out where there's an opportunity for us to focus in. So where there is just a little bit of change, we still want to identify, based on this data, where could we really focus our attention for priority 3. So the priority 3 group did specifically look at the survey results for 2 of the outcomes we're working on, and our growth in those areas will be based on how we continue to grow on this survey, as well as other progress monitoring opportunities that are specific to some of these areas.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, Tiffany?
I can't recall. I'm trying to look through this. So on page 2,
Yes?
that's page 2. What does NPS stand for again?
Net Promoter Score.
That we just talked about.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's when the positive word is being shared about the school. And so we want, or the district as a whole and the schools, we want that score to go up, which it did, which is great. And we want to continue an upward trajectory. So we will continue to work in that area to see how we can keep that growth moving in a positive direction.
So if I'm looking at table 2A, Net Promoter Score of the organization, how likely are you to recommend your organization? Fall 2023 showed negative 2.11. Fall 2024 shows 8.78 with that delta of, is that a delta?
Correct.
Of 10.89. Can you put that in layman's terms?
What that means is that more people shared positive things or had positive feelings about their experience working in the district. One thing to note is that the participants went up considerably as well, from 474 to 524, which we do believe would have an impact in the scores. That being said, part of what I think helped us to improve is actually identifying that this was something that we were going to be working on. Last year when we first brought the Net Promoter Score, the idea of that to the principals and the leadership team, it was something new that we really hadn't addressed prior to the first time we did this survey. So it's actually been an opportunity for us to realize that what we say and how we feel has an impact on how other people will feel about the potential of coming to the district.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I add a little bit to that? Just in terms of your question about the context of it, the Net Promoter Score ranges from a -100 to a +100. So that's the 200-point range that it can be in. So 0 would be balanced of
It's a
ambivalence. So anything less than 0 says we have more net detractors than promoters. Anything greater than 0 means we have more net promoters than detractors.
Thank you, Brett. I appreciate you giving that additional context. Thank you. All right, any other questions on the employee experience survey results? Questions?
Yes.
Yes.
So in the context of what Brett just said, so we look at the pages aren't numbered, this page, and under promoter in the middle section, how likely are you to recommend your organization? Is that also on a 200 scale? Or a scale of -100 to 0 to +100?
The individual percentages?
Or is it just percentage of total?
No, it's just
the
percentage
the
of total.
numerator is the 520
Right.
X.
Right.
And that's of our employees, right?
That is correct.
So
The employees who
we went from
participated.
470, 520, so we had basically 50 out of 470, so it's a little over 10%, about 12%. And so of those 12%, what I'm curious is it looks like we went up, our net promoter went up 20% from its foundational numerator, correct?
That is correct.
Right, so that's very positive. And my question is, and you may not have the data, are the incremental 50 or so participants all promoters?
We don't have that data, but that's a
Yeah.
good question.
They
Right,
would-
or is it peanut butter spread perfectly?
the survey company wouldn't give us that information if we asked them for it.
Okay,
They are
right.
protecting.
And so if
protecting
we
responses.
assume it's likely consistent across the enterprise, which is the most likely case experientially at least, then that's a very positive indicator, right?
That is correct.
Any thoughts from the team since the first survey was taken when in the spring?
The first survey, the employee experience survey, was taken last year, comparable time frame.
Okay,
So it had been about a year.
right. And so it's mostly then 2023, 24 school year stuff, right?
Correct.
Okay. Any thoughts from the team or any conclusions from comments of the surveyees as to why? Why did 20 out of 100 move to positive?
From my perspective, this mic is on or not. Our team had a concerted effort to roll these results out last year. So there's a process that we've learned with our consultant where we share the results and then we ask for feedback. So the process involves sharing what's going well and asking our teams across the entire district, all of our schools, all of our departments, here's where we scored really well. Why do you think we scored really well? What should we keep doing? And here's where we scored, where we have more opportunities for improvement. And we asked them what would it look like if we were to have higher scores in these areas. And each of our principals and our district leaders really had a concerted effort to ask those questions, listen, and then individually make efforts to improve in the areas that our teams said that we needed to improve in. I don't have the specifics for which teams wanted to improve in what areas, and Alicia may have covered some of that, but we've really paid attention to listening and then acting on what we're learning.
One of the things that I brought up when I did the initial Priority 3 presentation is the fact that we're getting into buildings and rounding, having conversations. So we're trying to do that at the district level, but the school-based leadership is also doing that. And I think the more we talk to people, build trust and relationships, they know that we care, and I think it does have an impact. One other thing to keep in mind is we do have natural turnover, so it's important to recognize that some people who may not have been happy here could have left, and we could have brought in some new people that are really excited about the opportunity to be here.
Okay. But if I may attempt to paraphrase what Ms. Weststein-Welsh said, it sounds like in its simplest form, the leadership asked, what does success look like? Attempted to deliver it, and it had an impact on the work mood survey. Is that correct? Okay. Good work.
Mr. Ridgway?
I would also add that this was the second year of the survey, but for me, I believe it's year one. You know, the year we did it, it was the first time we had done it, so we had multiple years of feedback coming out in that one. And this one, it's basically been the last year of feedback. So I think this provides that. Yeah, that's why I call it year zero, because I don't want to say it's quite of a throwaway year, but it's not as comparable to years going forward when it's the first time and you have sometimes 10 or 15
you established
years.
a benchmark first,
Right.
And now you're something to compare to or against.
Yeah.
So in my brief observation when I was looking at these numbers, and thank you, I know we asked for, it's helpful for context for me to know what it is we're looking at, what are we asking, and how are we asking it, because words matter. So yeah, I see improvement on, I believe my work positively impacts those we serve. That's very important to me, and I see that it went down a little bit, but 0.01 seems very minuscule, but it's also something that we should be leaning into, in my humble opinion. And I see progress being made to create a culture of success for employees across the organization and for those we serve. Those are the only two negatives, and thank you, Mr. Ridgway, for pointing out that this is kind of more year one. This is where we really can take this data moving forward and start to see momentum. But there's always room for improvement. We never want to rest on our laurels. So I was thankful to see these questions. And I have one question. With the survey, were there any questions that we did or didn't ask this year that we asked in the past?
No, it was the same survey
Okay.
this year as last. And one thing that we know, having gone through this process with you now, is that when we bring you the next survey results from Studer or our student-based survey that we do here in the district, that we should just plan to include the survey questions. So I have those ready for when Amy does the parent caregiver. So.
And then my one question, Mr. Norris, I'll give the floor to you. Is there an opportunity to ask who does this affect? So we're asking our staff, right? But leadership and all the way down. I'm curious if leadership is effective or not, if we as a team are effective or not, and if there's things we can do to improve the experience of our staff as leaders. So I don't know if there's an opportunity to ask Studer to include feedback and survey results on how that perception is of who we are here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I don't know. Go ahead.
It makes sense, and it's one of the frustrations, if you will, of dealing with Studer in particular, is they are so rigid on the questions. They won't let us just ask a 21st question
Gotcha.
or 5 additional questions. These are the 20 questions. Take them or leave them.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so there's good and bad to that. Yes, it gives them great benchmarking data so that we can give national comparisons, but we don't have the opportunity to push into something. And there's
And that makes
concern with that. But
Okay, well, that makes sense because consistency is important as well.
Additionally, I think we will also bring to you results from our district administration survey that we've also done this year for the first year. Just with the newness of everything last year, they did not give it, but this year we decided let's go ahead and give that district administration one as well, and that should also give us additional insight at that department and district leadership level Where this is more about at the school leadership level, definitely,
Okay,
to your point.
that makes sense. Okay, thank you. Chris, you had a,
Yeah, so for the life of me, I went back in history and I was looking at some of your previous presentations as it relates to slide number 4, retention rates. I could have sworn we were at the 80 to 85% retention rate. This one dips really low.
There's a reason for that. I'll explain it. It's a difference between CDE's data versus how we keep our data. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
So is this the same time period as the surveys on slide 2 and 3?
So
And the reason
this-
I'm asking is from fall of 2023 to fall of 2024, by and large, we went up, right? Which means more people are happier, but our retention rate indicates that we've lost a lot of people. So what do we believe?
Well, I think it does go to part of what I said before about the fact that we do have turnover in the district. I will go into a little bit more on the retention rates and how CDE looks at retention versus how we do, because I noticed the difference and I wanted to be prepared to address that with you. But I do think that it's important to keep in mind that when there's that natural turnover that happens, there are times when we have turnover due to the fact that this isn't the best fit for someone. And there could be something going on in someone's personal life that impacts how they see their job. And I think that it's important to keep in mind that these scores, our goal will be to see an upward trajectory. We won't expect that it will always be a positive growth, but we want to continue to see growth over time, which is one reason. While I wish there was some flexibility with the survey, I do think it would be interesting to just watch it over time, whether we take comparable questions or without a whole lot of change, to just see how this changes and grows over time. But since we don't know, like Brett referenced, exactly who's taking this, we can't even say what percentage of these are classified staff members versus administrators versus staff members such as teachers and licensed staff. So we just have to take the data and assume that it could apply to anyone, not knowing who it is, and try to use this to do some positive things to continue growing the relationships and trust.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One last thing, just for me personally, and I'm not directing you to go do it, but it's important for me to keep my finger on the pulse as to the why people are leaving, and that's completely separate outside of the survey. I understand that. I just wanted to make that note.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
So one other question, and also just a thought while you were having this discussion, I was trying to look up what a national turnover rate is for K through 12, and I'm not advocating any of these websites because I don't know how credible the entities are, but the numbers are staggering on the high side. And for example, from the Department of Education, 57,000 teachers will resign, will have resigned in 2024, and that's from the U.S. Department of Education. In the 22-23 school year, according to another site, 30% of new teachers resigned, and 26% of teachers within 3 to 7 years experience resigned. So it sounds like there's for lack of an elegant term, a window of risk in years 1 through 7 with significantly high turnover. So I would be really curious, to Chris's point, of the turnover ratios, how many are in years 1 through 7?
Which is something we could really break this down and get
Yeah.
that specific information if we didn't continue using Studer and did it a different way and got some additional information.
So that was just a real cursory, quick and very dirty way to get something that says where are we versus a national trend. Not that we can't continue to try for excellence. And speaking of national trend, that was one of my questions, is two things really. Is there any way to get national versus state data?
So I did what you did, Ron, and I actually
You
did
got-
a
you got your
Google
own.
search. I use a lot of ChatGPT, and I found some great information And I'd be happy to share it with you offline, but we decided to go based
Yeah.
on what CDE provides for the state level comparison. So I was able to find something similar to maybe what you have found when I did a search that I thought I would present, but then when preparing for this, made the decision we'd just stick with the data that we knew we had from CDE and that we know we have from our district.
Yeah, I'd love to know that offline.
Yeah.
And then lastly, on this page, which I assume is 3.
Correct.
In the packet,
Yes.
in looking at Studer's website, I assume they have many hundreds of clients. Is that correct? Based on the amount of principals and consultants they have? It's probably 10 or so each. Where are we in the windows on these scores of excellent, proficient, medium, needs improvement, horrible, get the lights and the fire trucks going?
So if you look at bullet 3, I was pushing to get a little more information. When we talked about this at our last work session, one of the things you had hoped that we could get was specific districts that might be a little bit more like our size, and just, try to really understand what this data means to us.
Yeah, peership.
Correct. And so I reached out to our consultant, and they are in the middle of some changes organizationally, and she said she is not able, she will get us this third bullet of information, and we could add what you're requesting, but that she did not have the capacity to do it right then for this presentation.
Okay, I think it'd be great for us to know if, for example, to Tiffany's point, right, so what question was that, 19?
19.
Yeah. So if 5.0 is perfect, and we're measuring in hundredths, then we're in the 89th percentile here. And so my question is that in the window of excellence? It appears to be there, but it would be interesting to understand that. And it looks like, based on Studer's profiles of their team, that they're national. So that's another side doorway for us to get some quality national data, right?
Correct.
Okay.
I wrote that down. We can plan to get what I had on the third bullet, and then I added what you just requested. So I will continue to work with our consultant on that. All right?
Thanks.
And at your last presentation, you had shared, these are our strengths and these are our weaknesses. So when I pointed out number 19, it's still a very high score versus number 11, I feel the organization level resources are allocated to maximize effectiveness across the organization. That's a lower score. Even if we've grown in it, it's still a lower score of the overall aggregate scores.
That is correct.
And you had pointed that out last
Yep.
time of where our strengths and our weaknesses are.
Correct. And when I did the action work with the action team I'm working with, we specifically tried to look at this data to determine the areas of focus. And rather than solely looking at this data, also talking as a team to determine what are the needs that you're hearing in your departments and schools, because we want to address the needs and do something proactive to continue creating a positive workplace for our employees.
Excellent.
Thank you. All right, and then the last page is covering the state retention data. So it's state versus Lewis Palmer School District retention rates, and then the total retention rates in comparison to nearby school districts. So the thing I want to point out, because like it was mentioned, our data that I have shared with you looks a little more positive with respect to retention than some of the state data. So we did reach out to CDE to just clarify, why is there a difference? And one of the biggest reason is that our data, we take out people who have retired, who are moved due to a military move, and those who are on FMLA and not able to return to their job at the beginning of the year. So they don't consider that data, they don't know all that data, and so they expect that theirs will be a little different than ours for that reason.
Does that make sense to everybody? Yes? Thumbs up? Okay. So, for example, Lewis Palmer total retention shows 67.07 compared to all these others. That is us compared to the bottom graph, the total retention rates. Is that ours or theirs?
That is theirs. This
Okay.
is all their data on the
Okay.
bottom graph
Gotcha.
and the top graph. This is just their data.
Okay, understood.
And I thought about putting
I don't know.
what I shared with you in this, and I thought that would probably be confusing to throw that in there. I will, when I do my presentations, I'm going to continue thinking through what I can do. Like I could have a category where it's like, this is how we typically keep track of it, but here's the overall number with the military, FMLA, any sort of retirement, so that when I share this data with you, there isn't a surprise or a disparity that we didn't expect.
I actually thought this was valuable to just put it in there.
I agree.
Really helpful.
Thank you.
Any?
Yeah,
go for it.
one last quick question. Was this survey given out to everybody, every employee of the district, or was it limited in scope?
Every employee.
Okay.
We had 65% participation across the district.
And just so you know, we worked with Amy Matizik and the supervisors and principals across the district to really encourage people to take it many times. Like, it wasn't just sent out once and we hope they remember. It was a lot of reminders because we really do want to encourage good participation.
Any last thoughts or questions before we move to the next agenda item?
Sorry, I had too much coffee this morning.
It's okay. I had a lot of Diet Dr. Pepper, so I can handle it.
You win. And as you take another sip.
Yeah, this is water.
I'm looking at the second bar graph here, which I think caught Chris's attention to. Essentially, if we use the state retention ratio as a numerator, we're 12.5% worse or under them. Number one, just to be safe, was the time window the last full school year?
Correct.
Okay. Secondly, was there an anomaly here, or is there a thought as to what caused this delta?
I think it's important to go back to the exit survey data, the separation forms, and those reasons people indicate that they are looking for another job. And when I think back, I could share that with you again sometime soon, but what I really think stands out is sometimes they're just ready to leave the industry altogether. Other times they are leaving to go to another district for whatever reason, including maybe for pay. And sometimes it's just not the right fit. You know, they're looking for a different opportunity altogether. So, and I do have that data specifically broken down, so I am happy to provide that.
Yeah. Because it's interesting to me the difference in the delta between classroom teachers and principals.
One thing to point out is that I'm guessing you probably had figured this out, but principals is completely separate from administrators, and we're thinking when they look at administrators, they're talking about like district level administrators.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Obviously, one can overslice this data and make a career out of it, and then we have kids not getting educated, right?
Correct.
So I do want to put a grain of salt in here, but the data of people leaving the industry and what I found on some of these national sites, provided as credible, of course, would indicate that the state dynamic in that regard should be similar to ours. And so therefore it leads me to at least ask the question, was there an anomaly of some sort or fashion? For example, was it last year or this year that we hired a lot of first and second year teachers? Was that this year?
Last year we hired more first and second year teachers than this year. This year we were able to bring in a number of teachers who had prior years of experience, and I think that is because we are giving them credit for more prior years.
Yep. Yeah, and so not to belabor the conversation, but if some of these statistics are even close, and half of the teachers fall off in years 1 through 7, then your ratio of turnover goes down if you can find people that are fit that have 7+ years experience, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and to your point, when the reason the state versus LPS retention rates, I appreciate that we're doing the exit interviews so that we know where we as an organization and who we are and how we can make sure what we're doing well, that we're continuing to lean in on that, and where we need to improve, that we are working on that. But this is, all things considered, all things being equal, shows where we rest in comparison to the state. I found actually the paraprofessional number to be quite alarming. When we have, according to the CDE, 51.43% of our paraprofessionals versus 71 at the state level. And that is, that I have heard that when I've been in buildings and talking to educators and parents, that paraprofessionals is a place that we need to figure it out.
When I think back to when I started at Prairie Winds, the paraprofessionals that had been there in the STAR MDD program had been there for so long. And it just hasn't been like that in some of the programs as much recently. There just seems to be a higher retention, higher turnover rate with some of our team members in that area, which is really unfortunate because it impacts the kids. But I do think that we saw a gain when we started paying them more. And we are paying them about $4 more per hour over the course of the last 2 years, which is considerable. So it's interesting to look at where they show us versus some of the numbers that we have.
Thank you for that reality check.
Yeah, of course.
Ready to move on? Thank you so much.
You're
Thank you for
welcome.
leaning into that.
Of course.
Okay, B2, report to the community. Ms. Matizik, you have the floor.
All right. I'm super excited today to share this rough draft with you for our report to the community. And first off, I just wanted to provide a little bit of background information for you. When I do projects like this or communications plans, the first place I always start is with a little bit of research. So for me, what that meant with this project was working with my team and finding some great examples out there. So knowing a number of different professionals in school districts, communications professionals across the country, researched, took a look in depth at different reports that were out there, found things that we liked, found trends with layout and design, and then from there just kind of made a list of what are some things we would like to see in our report. The second piece to that then was I then had the opportunity to sit down with President Upchurch and Dr. Shank and say, you know, here's our list. Here's things that we could include in the report. What do you like? What do you think is a must-have? What do you think is a nice to have if there's room? And then we kind of put both of those pieces together, what we learned from great examples and the feedback, the early preliminary feedback from the board, and created kind of our roadmap for how we wanted to go with the first draft. So we did land on a total of 8 pages, and if you're wondering, well, why 8 pages? Really, it was the most effective. I think my battery actually literally just stopped. So stand by.
Good thing she's not
There we go.
Quick fix.
Quick fix. So again, with 8 pages there, it really was the most cost-effective choice because the organization that we're partnering with to actually print this and mail this for us, their printer works in 8-page increments. So we could do 8 pages, 16, 32, et cetera. We could have done a 12 and thought initially, well, maybe 12 would be a good place to land. But then it's actually quite a bit more expensive than 8 and closer to 16 than you think because the printer has to do a lot of extra work. So to be able to find something that's cost effective and still big enough to put the amount of content we want in there, we thought 8 pages was a good place to land. This is something that will be mailed to all households within the district boundaries, so it's approximately 18,000 based on where we land with specific zip codes and actual carrier routes. But when you flip through it and look at some of the pieces, you'll find some key elements that you would find just in design right now when it comes to communications, because people like what I like to call snackable content. It's smaller bits. We'll still tell the story with some articles and larger write-ups, such as the message from the board and the superintendent. But as you flip through it, you'll also see lots of visual cues. You'll see infographics. You will see lots of different components that talk to different people within our audience. Some people are going to relate to show me the detail, show me the numbers. Some of that is there, but if they want more specifics, you're going to also find a lot of QR codes that'll take people to the website for more information. We will also have people, though, within our target who are looking for testimonials, who are looking for, tell me that you're making a difference. Show me that you are making a difference to students, to my child. So we have a number of different testimonials from staff who are also parents, a testimonial from an alumna who is also a parent and also a key community ambassador. You will see quotes from students, because who can tell our story best? It's the students. You'll also find a full school directory, a plug for the new CTE center that is coming, and a brief financial overview. But most importantly, you're going to see that every single school is represented in some way, whether it is with photographs, whether it is with their staff member being featured in a story, or just the student quotes. Every school is in there in some way, shape, or form. The audience for the piece is pretty broad because it is going to all households, but really I would say a key target public for us would be those households that do not have students within our schools, because we can reach those families in different ways, but those households, which is roughly half in all of our zip codes, that don't, this will be a place and a piece where they can see an overview of so many different things about the district. And I would like to really believe and feel, and I do feel confident, that this just paints the full story of the district in so many different ways, with numbers, with testimonials, with stories, because that's what it's all about, is show me the students, show me the staff, tell me what they think about learning and working within D38. The last piece that I wanted to mention just briefly was that if you look at the back page, I'm also happy to share that there are a couple different organizations that are helping us financially subsidize this particular piece. And that's because they really want to be able to align themselves as financially supporting what we do in the district and stand behind what we do. So it's nice to know that we do have some of those costs that will be covered by those organizations. So really what I'm asking for in our discussion today is just for you to take an overview of everything and see if there are key pieces, key different content areas that you think are missing.
Team? Ron, you have that look on your eyes like you're ready to share.
I have a couple of really small things which I think I can just take offline with Amy. I think it's excellent.
Thank you.
It's overdue. I'm curious how you got to the point of wanting to do this.
Mm-hmm. You know, this is really something that the district has had. I think it goes back a couple years since there was a piece like this. And like I said earlier, this is truly our opportunity to be able to communicate with every household within boundaries, but especially those families that do not have students within the district. We need to be able to reach them as well, to tell them, to show them what we're doing in the district. And you'll also kind of find, I think, a nice invitation for them in the actual message from the board and superintendent, because it does say, hey, you know, if you haven't been in one of our schools, we'd like to invite you to come out and take a look. Come out and visit one of our musical, theatrical performances. Come see an athletic event, because we can show you within this piece about our district, but we want to have that opportunity to say, come take a look for yourself, because we're doing amazing things.
Well, that does make me wonder if there's something we might want to add. I don't know what that looks like yet, because I'm just kind of thinking about it. But that points out that we don't just use our facilities for people who are actively in school. Our facilities are used for programs all over the community. Boy Scouts, community events, the seniors are here. There's so many people that are in our buildings that have nothing to do with students. So,
Yeah, that's a good thought, a good thought. I'll make some notes.
I wonder if that's something that you could incorporate into the statistics, where, like, we have the lunches served box. So that's a good idea of community members served, maybe just make, I don't,
well, and maybe some way to point out that there's ways that the facilities can be rented and used for other programs as well.
yeah.
Thank you.
This
Yeah.
is also part of our, if you recall, when we talked about our strategic plan and our vision with priority number 5 of getting in front of the community and going to them, not expect, we can't be the district that says, come to us. We need to be going to our community members and engaging with a parent that's in the buildings may have, this may be, they may already see and know this, but a community member who shows up at a town council meeting but is not in our buildings, for example. This is very directly related to our priority number 5 on leaning into, or I guess it's number 6. I keep forgetting we added one. 6 of our communication plan. And a lot of school districts do a report to the community, and we have not done one in a few years, and it seemed like every time we were going and doing a report to the community, our timing, it seemed like we would be in front of the taxpayers, and so this is a way to just be in partnership with our community and just show them this is who we are, and reminding our community this is who we are.
I also thought that the subtlety of what you mentioned earlier, Amy, about the fact that a good portion of this is being paid for by third parties was very strategic.
Thank you.
Right, because right, wrong, or indifferent, we're not going to please all the people all the time. It's just statistically impossible. But there's going to be a few people that say, boy, this is really neat. I wonder how many of my educational tax dollars are spent on this. And so the subtlety of that and the way it was done particularly struck me as being well thought through and done.
Thank you.
Question? Do we have permission from I assume we have permission from our students to be on our mailer?
100%.
Okay.
All of the students that are in here, we have, they're in the system for having permission for promotional purposes. And a lot of times with stuff like this, before I print, I'll actually just double check and make sure, hey, here's what we're doing, because this is a pretty high profile piece. Mm-hmm. And you'll see that there are some places too, like the student voices section, where parents did share with us photos, but just based on the different ones that we received, if they were from athletic events or from the holidays, we thought, you know what, we want to make sure they all have a similar look and feel, so we're going to be going out to take our own photographs with that. So again, we'll just make sure the families know, hey, here's what's going to be, that's going to be used for. And even with the quotes that go with that, a lot of parents were actually pretty excited that their student was going to be featured. And I know that I can think of one of the elementary ones in particular where mom said, we want to think about this for a few days before we actually decide what we want to say, but we'll get back to you. So, yeah.
And there's no NIL payment here either, right?
There isn't yet, right? That's crazy.
I see that as a business opportunity for you and I to be their agents. Yeah.
On the QR codes, just a quick question. Thank you for including the QR codes. This will go, for example, does it go directly to the specific page, our financial page, for example? Okay. What made me think of that is when we're thinking of our staff and we're highlighting our alumni, and we're highlighting, for example, Miss Amy Sinkowski being one of our alumni, I wanted to make sure that we were also leaning into the voices of our staff. And so when I think back to what we just saw on the graph and that information of what is our turnover rate, and staff often says, is our voice being heard? Does our community understand or hear our voice? So having those QR codes, and I just wanted to make sure that I guess I'd ask, do we think that we've captured the voices of our staff in this piece? And I would ask anybody. Yay, nay? So, but. Yes, no? You don't know?
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure that I understand what you're asking, and maybe that's
Okay.
just making sure that we have the voices of all of our staff.
Well, we can't have the voice, when I look over this, I'm looking for where, for example, we feature one of our assistant principals,
Yes.
right? So I wanted to make sure when we're going through this, are we, when somebody's looking at this, or a staff member is looking at this, do they feel represented in this as well? Does that help?
Feel represented.
Yeah. The intention was to make sure that we had a staff person in there, that we had a voice from a parent, that we had a voice from alumni, a voice from community. And we captured those with Sinkowski and also with Madeline, the town manager. I think that you'll feel like there are voices from our buildings with the students, which are essentially a reflection
Important.
of our teachers.
Very important.
Of their work. I think that the student voices, in fact, I think would be one of the elements our staff would probably be most excited and most proud about.
For 806 total staff members, how many of those are teachers and paraprofessionals or have direct instructional contact with our students?
Yeah, I would have to look that up unless Ms. Welch knows that off the top of her head. A lot of this content, we had to, we had feelers out in so many different places to find out what the numbers are, but the specific details of that, she would probably be able to answer better.
Oh, could you please restate your question?
Of the 806 total staff members, how many of those staff members have direct contact with instruction of students?
That is a very good question. I wouldn't want to guess. I mean, we'd have to take out, and it's hard to say, like transportation, they do have direct contact with students. Food and nutrition has direct contact. Maintenance has direct contact,
Although she did say
Yeah,
instructional.
really, yeah.
Instruction.
Yeah, instruction though, I could find that out.
I believe it's a little over 400 is when I looked at that number earlier.
That would make
Our
sense.
teachers, if we're kind of looking at that classroom
Well, I
teacher.
was thinking of
And if you're
teachers.
thinking more, right?
Paraprofessionals, special education.
Yeah, special ed would be included in that, but we can get you exact number, but it's
I was just, that's,
80% of staff, or of our, our staff, but that would include the additional folks that you talked about with transportation, custodial, nutrition.
I'm happy to get the information on
Some of
those
our
who
budget,
directly impact instruction if we're speaking specific to teachers and paras who are special ed or
Yeah.
instructional paras. So if you want that information, I can provide it to Amy for this content.
yeah, and thank you, Ron. I was thinking at the classroom level. And the reason I asked is this work that you've put into this and the layout, it's very beautifully put together. And I'm not saying put that in there. I was curious if somebody clicks on a QR code, if they could find that information out. So not that we need to revamp this. I just want to make sure I'm being clear that I'm not saying fix it. I think it looks great. I think it's wonderful. I was asking if they were to use a QR code, or how easily accessible is the information for somebody who may ask questions such as that. I didn't mean to take us down a rabbit hole. I was just curious when the follow-up with communication is with our website, because we have a QR code for people to go on there and say, here, I want more information. Sure. So how easily accessible is that information? Not that,
Great thought.
I apologize if it sounded like I was saying redo it all, because I wasn't.
I didn't hear that,
Okay.
but I think it's interesting information. It's not information that's at any place on the website right now, but that doesn't mean it's not an opportunity for us to look at doing that. So happy to discuss it with our team.
I guess I'm just, put a note for future projects. Not now. But yeah,
One other thought.
yes.
Everybody remember this?
Yep.
So in the spirit of being comprehensive from this department, if I remember correctly, this was more intended to be staff-facing, and it sounds like this is more intended to be citizen-facing. Very much. Is that correct or no?
The strategic plan is also community-facing. I know Dr. Dattery has taken that to some community presentations
Okay.
already. And there are definitely elements in here, or even these pieces, for example, like the strategic plan or the community report may be shared with staff in other venues and might be shared digitally. But even though they might be part of our broad audience with the report to the community, our key public, it really is those households
Right.
that don't have, that may not know as much about D38 as our families who are directly related to us.
So it's the TCP of this is citizens, and the TCP of the other is staff, and there's plenty of et al., but, sorry, targeted customer profile. Right?
I would say community a little bit on both of them.
Okay.
But, and staff will see elements and see the information as well in a lot of different ways.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other thoughts? So I'd ask my fellow board members, our community representatives, when this lands in a mailbox of a community member who doesn't have any children in our schools, but wants to know more, learn more, or is either supportive or not supportive, do you think that this is comprehensive in reaching that target demographic of sharing who we are as D38?
I do. I would change the word "the" to "our" to make it more
Yeah,
inclusive.
right here, report to our community.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the only change I would make. And the one worry I have is the pictures are very non-diverse. I know we have a fairly non-diverse community.
You will see some of that reflected once we get the student profile pictures
Good,
put in
thank you,
there.
thank
Because
you.
there was some thinking on that, making sure that we had different races, that we had boys, that we had girls.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're right, we might be a little less diverse than some other districts, but
Mm-hmm.
will there be some representation in that with the student profile pictures? There will.
Good. Thanks.
Now, when this goes out, is this going to go out basically like that?
It will actually be more magazine profile, where it's just a full piece. But the top portion is what the mailing and printing company needs to do our nonprofit status in BSHA and that information up there. So think of it more like a magazine, which is why when you're looking at the pages, you're going to be, there's your
Well,
two-page
and
spread.
the reason I was asking is just how this is going to present in someone's mailbox, because a lot of times we get things like this that will be folded,
Yeah.
pop it open, and then now you've got your magazine out. But I want to make sure whatever they see in their mailbox is enough to make them want to open it.
Yes.
It'll look like this, right?
Just twice,
Just a little thicker, but
8 instead of 4.
Correct.
So they will go out as full 8.5 by 11?
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Thank you.
It gives me the warmies.
Thank you. I like that.
on this cold day.
Yes.
One other? Can we make this serial? I'm not talking about Captain Crunch.
Okay.
He was talking about life cereal.
As in, can we do one again in this? We're going to do one in January. This will go out in January.
That could be a great goal, to make it an annual piece at the beginning
Can we
of
do
each
one
year.
in September? And then another one, I would say twice a year if we can afford the expense. If we want to stay current and we want to stay in front of people, a couple times a year is probably about right.
We could do it a couple times a year. We could also look at doing the report to our community in January, and then maybe in the fall, there's a similar size piece, but maybe it's more magazine-like. Maybe
Yeah,
something
yeah,
that is
yeah.
feature stories. It
Right.
could have a different flavor, but still be something that's in front of families a second time of year.
I mean, there's definitely something to be said for timing, because if and when that day comes when we have to ask to put something on the ballot, having that information fresh in their mind would be,
Right.
be important.
And if,
We don't want that to be the first year we do it, because that just looks
yeah,
a
it's a little
staged.
kludgy.
Right on.
Right.
I agree.
But if and again, we're all creatures of habit, right? If the format is the same, then people are accustomed to what it is and it doesn't get tossed, right? And I'm no expert in this area of what eyeballs adhere to better, but this certainly looks very attractive and professional.
Thank you.
This is, for lack of better terms, this is a year delayed. That was a board goal, is to have a communication piece similar to this, a report to the community on an annual basis. We had also talked about, as a board, having 2 pieces that go out in the mailboxes twice a year,
Awesome.
with the report to community being an annual one and something smaller in the fall. Because again, to your point, taxpayer dollars and how much these cost is important, and to be mindful of that as well. But yes, I do agree that this should be something annual that that our community is accustomed to and knows is part of who we are, and us wanting to be a part of the community and wanting the community to be a part of us. So a report out, I think, annually is important.
Awesome.
So I hope that we continue to keep this going annually as well.
Awesome. I love it. And if we did look at something a second time during the year, there are a lot of different ways we could go as far as size, as far as cost. But I'm a huge advocate for that. And if that gave us another channel for being able to put stories out there in front of the community, I'm in favor of that.
I'm going to put a little bit of a monkey wrench in the fall mailer. I think if we do something in the fall, it has to be very, very simplistic, because we will have 2 board seats on the ballot. And the last thing we want to do is make it seem like not that we would and not that we do. I really believe that this team and this district wants to make sure we're just communicating. But inevitably, you communicate and somebody says, "Are you trying to sway?" So just being mindful of that in the fall, making sure whatever we put out there, that we are very neutral and not swaying. So just wanted to
Thank you.
keep that in the back of our heads. Sir? Sir? We good? Everybody? Ready to move on? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And Dr. Dattery, I know that this is a vision that you've had as well that is important to you, and this is something that you've done in your previous districts as well. So thank you so much for all of you guys.
Amazing job.
Amy, you did a fantastic job at this. Thank
I
you.
had help too, so we have some really talented photographers and other communications professionals too. So
Well, I firmly believe that something like this is not a one-person job or success, and that this truly is a team effort by all. So, thank you.
thank you.
Okay, moving on to B3, capacity study. Our Chief Business Officer, Brett Ridgway, Director of Planning, Facilities and Grounds, Melissa Andrews. You both have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Melissa will do most of the talking here today, but I just wanted to set the table a little bit and make sure that we are focused, that this is talking about capacity, establishing how we are quantifying capacities, not taking the next step yet of where are we in relation to that capacity. Are we over capacity? Are we under capacity, right? That'll be the natural tendency. So I'm going to ask you to resist that urge to look at it and say, okay, this means we're over capacity here. Because what we really want to do is just to get comfortable in the math and the philosophy that Melissa's put together here on determining what our building capacities are, so we can inform that conversation, which needs to be a separate second conversation. Okay, so that's my one ask for you. Thank you, Melissa.
All right.
That's my computer, sorry. Okay. So we started to have this conversation once before. I don't know if you can hear me. Is that better?
That's better.
Okay. So I just wanted to kind of go back and touch base on the things that we started with before, and that's to look at this and the philosophy that we are going to be looking at our buildings and how many they can hold the same way other districts around us do, which is utilizing our core spaces, which are typically your homeroom class for your elementaries, your math, science, social studies, and English in your middle and high schools, at 25 kids per classroom. We know that the classrooms can fluctuate up and down from there, so we're not saying that this is all the teachers can handle in those classrooms. There are building codes that put that in alignment, but this way we're speaking apples to our districts around us. And so as we go through here, we're gonna see the floor plans. They're gonna have yellow rooms, which indicate those are core classrooms. And then if they have a patterned color in there, most of them are gonna be green. That means that it's a classroom that could be used as a core classroom, but could also be used for specials or special education or some other program need. So touching back again, we did talk about Prairie Winds. And so this was built as a K-5, 3-round elementary school. And so that just means there's 3 kindergartens, 3 first grades, all the way up through. And at 25 kids per classroom here, that gives us a capacity of 450 students with this model. There is 1 room that's specials, or it's allocated that could be those specials that we talked about. And I'm gonna move through this one fairly quickly because we have discussed it, and the other ones we can take some more time on. So the current use for Prairie Winds, because we're educating kids slightly differently than we were at the time it was built, we have a 2-round K-6, and I have in here, and I didn't change the verbiage, I apologize. We were talking about doing 2 blended rooms in which we did not, so those turned back into just core classrooms. But basically what this tells us, with this philosophy, we have a few extra spaces because the 6th grade doesn't allow us to do that 3-round. So now we have room for the STAR program, the GT program, and a technology program in those little green dotted boxes. But the core classes that we have allows for 400 students with this model. Okay, something new. Ray Kelmer, when it was designed as a K-5 4-round elementary school with 2 half-day kindergarten rooms. And so this took the building up to a capacity of 600 students when it was operated under this model. Okay. So currently we're using it with a 2-round K-6 model. And with this, it accommodates 385 students, but we're starting to see how many spaces that they're utilizing that have SSN and special education and intervention and GT and just a lot of space where we've kind of expanded out. And so if we look at this building and we needed to use it in the most effective way possible, we could potentially do this with a K-6 with 2 preschool rooms and have that as a 3-round elementary school. There is a little special education suite just north of the library, and the library is large enough that we could cut out a portion of that and use it for technology like Prairie Winds does. And if we did this, we could utilize that building for 585 students. Yes?
Question, and Kilmer's a good example. So the current use has special ed, SSN, resource moderate, interventionist, and GT. Why would those not be utilized in a K-5 scenario?
So at the time that the building was built, we didn't have the special education requirements that we do now.
Oh, interesting, okay.
And so what we want to be able to do is work with the schools and with the programs and find out if we have needs for special education where there's a pull-out group for 3 kids or something like that. We don't need a 25-student classroom to do that. So when we find out there's lots of programs like that going into the school, we can come in as a facilities team and put up some temporary walls, permanent walls, something like that, and take one classroom, divide it into 3 spaces for 3 pull-out groups, and utilize 25 kids worth of space instead of 75 kids worth of space. And so that helps us make decisions that make sense when we're altering a building, still providing the proper educational programs, but utilizing the space better than just sprawling. Yes.
First of all, good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for investing this time with us.
Sure.
Sounds like she had the Dr. Pepper also. With full respect for the fact that this exercise is intended to help us establish baselines, as you go through the individual buildings, would you mind just letting us know how many their students are servicing today? Just so that we can sort of balance our minds against what's actually happening.
It will take me a minute.
Brett has that on page 473 of his monthly package. It is in column 42B.
Perfect.
Am I correct, Mr. Ridgway?
No.
Am I near?
Relatively speaking.
Am I dismissed?
I will get the information.
Yeah, I just think it'd be nice for comparative purposes for us all to say, look, it's the current use case, for example, is 385 kids, and we currently are housing 370.
We can do that. Just my introduction to the topic was to ask you not to go too far down that path, right? So
That's why my preface was with full respect for.
Okay.
Maybe partial respect is a better term.
Partial respect, yeah.
So back to my question, Melissa.
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure I'm wrapping my head around when it says current use versus ideal use. And when I didn't see GT or interventionist in ideal use, or SSN, that's why I was curious why that would not be included in ideal use, or is it included and I'm just not seeing it?
It is not in this one, and so there is special education room up, we've moved up close to the resource room, and then again, there are special education spaces up north of the library technology area, if north were in the top part of the building. But we could work with them on utilizing space.
Okay.
We could, trying to remember what we were talking about doing with that.
My point being, the reason I'm asking is, while you're thinking that, is to make sure we're not losing opportunities for our students with an ideal scenario, that we're
sure.
still leaning in on
Yeah.
making sure that we have the optimal opportunities for our students to learn.
Correct. And then we also do have 2 preschool rooms. Is this the right location for 2 preschool rooms? I mean, there's a lot of questions. This isn't to say this is what we have to do. It's just knowing that we have
Gotcha.
abilities to adjust to this.
Okay. Put my head down.
So the Kilmer number from October count for head count was 300 even. 374 is the Prairie Winds head count from October count.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on Kilmer before we move on? Okay. So Lewis Palmer Elementary was actually designed as a 6-8 middle school. And that was with 2 teams per grade. And then it also functioned well as a 4-round K-5 elementary school with 2 half-day kindergartens, I believe that was going to say. And so with this model, with the the 6-8 model, that could hold 600 students at that time. And as you can see, there were like home economics rooms and other interesting things in that space, science labs. So currently, they have changed to a 2-round K-4, and then they also have 3 rounds of 5-6. Just the way they're currently utilizing that. And with the core rooms that they're utilizing, that can hold 430 students. They have a lot of spaces in green with a coach, an interventionist, a vision and hearing room. It looks like there's a fourth grade room that should actually be yellow in there. There's a lounge, but we also have a teacher's lounge built in the center core area. There's a workroom. There are 3 other workrooms that were designed into the space. There's a GT room, a Rise, and a Resource, and a Shine. So we have lots of spaces that we've expanded into this as well. So again, looking if we could maximize the space, we could have a 3-round K6 with 1 half-day preschool room. And with that model, that would accommodate 555 students. And so that still does leave room for the GT. It leaves room for Resource, a couple special education spaces, the Rise and the Shine room. They still have lounge, they still have teachers' workrooms. It just hasn't gotten as big as it did at one point in time. And that still leaves the 2 locker rooms, which they don't need in an elementary school, so those at some point in the future could be converted into something here if we needed.
How many people knew that was designed as a middle school? 2? All right. We heard rumors of it, but we finally got confirmation, so, yeah.
The library was the giveaway.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this one also does take into consideration, we are looking at it right now, but the kitchen was larger when they did the addition to add the cafeteria in, and that swap from being the gymnasium multi-purpose area into its own cafeteria, and the kitchen was cut in half, but with the food services that were required, now we're looking at expanding that back into the area it was originally, and that's why you see kitchen in 2 spaces on this ideal use also. Any questions on Lewis Palmer Elementary? All right. Bear Creek.
409.
Oh, 409, thank you.
October count, head count.
There we go.
Are you writing those down?
I'm making a spreadsheet for you.
Right, and these come
I
in
want a
conversations when we're having open enrollment and choice, and we're capping some of these, making sure it's the right decision. Can the building hold more? Does it make sense not to cap if there's space, if we utilized it differently? So that's where these conversations can be very beneficial. Yeah.
This applies to all our buildings that we're going through. When you were going through this and looking at what is current versus what is ideal, how engaged or involved were the building leaders, the principals, and maybe some veteran educators that have been around and seen what the buildings look like or how they function best?
That's going to be the next steps coming up. We're going to meet with the principals, run through this, and then we can have the individual discussion points. And really, some of these spaces where we don't have the enrollment, just knows that they can be utilized if ever we get to a point where we need to. But there are going to be some places that are tight that we're going to need to have some conversations and work with the building leaders to see if they can be utilized any differently, if it makes sense.
Yep, that's why I asked.
Yep, yeah, definitely next step. An important next step.
Okay. So Bear Creek, as designed, it opened as a middle school, a 6-8 middle school. And usually you can find a pretty clear pattern on how it was anticipated to be used, but it looks like at the way they designed it could have been 600 to 850 students. It was really a little bit confusing. So this, both upper and lower levels are shown here. The yellow rooms are the core rooms. The little stripy classrooms are areas that were designed as something like a talented and gifted or just a general classroom, but could be used either way. As a core classroom, it could be used as a specials type program. But we have the need to use it as an elementary school, and so right now it is a PK through 6 program. And this is both upper and lower level. There are 33 K6 rooms that are being used. And with 25 students per classroom on average, that gives us room for 825 K6 students, or not, yeah, K6. We have 4 preschool rooms, 2 half-day classes. That would put, 15 kids per session or 30 kids per day. That's 120 spaces for preschoolers. And so that gives this building, as being used, a capacity of 945 students. Do you have their current enrollment?
So the apples to apples there, the K-6 number for October count was 789, and the preschool number was 80, for a total of 869.
And so they've utilized all the spaces. The Smart Lab, again, is something that they are using for their programming. It could flex either way towards another academic classroom for core or the specials like it is, or special program. Okay, ideal use, really, the way that it's being utilized is pretty close. If we did this as a 3-round elementary school, that would give us 35 K-6 rooms, and that would be 875 K-6 students. But reducing that down to 2 preschool rooms, 2 half-day sessions would give us room for 60 preschool students here, and that gives us 935 student capacity. So the reason that that makes sense is you have 3 kindergarten rooms, they move up to 3 third grade or first grade rooms, 3 second grade rooms. And we're not doing that right now just based on the population that's in that school. We've got some bubbles here and there. But again, in an ideal world, if all the numbers fit, this would be the best way to use that. This helps drive conversations on if preschool is where it needs to be. And so in this scenario, looking at what we've worked on with Palmer Lake Elementary School, trying to add a preschool room there, made a lot of sense. Okay, any questions on Bear Creek? All right, Palmer Lake Elementary, as designed, it was a K-5 3-round elementary school with 2 half-day kindergarten rooms. This was a very, very difficult building because it had so many additions. So we finally have a good map of the whole thing. And so with it, the way it was designed, with all those additions, it was 15 core classrooms and 2 half-day kindergarten rooms. That gave us a capacity of 475 students as built. They are currently using it as a K-6 2-round elementary school. And has 2 kindergarten rooms, and at this point in time, no preschool, but there will be next year. And so that put us at a capacity, the way that they're using it, for 350 students. It gives us a sensory technology and special education group room and intervention.
That October count number was 286.
And if we did the ideal use, and that's actually what we're aiming for next year, is moving that preschool down where technology used to be and moving the technology right across the street. There is a room they have asked for. It's down, how do I do the little, does this button do this?
The pointer, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I can find it. Okay,
Yeah,
anyway, do you see it?
Yeah.
Right across from the sensory room, there we go. If you go up to the sensory room, to the right, there you go, and straight across there, you see the special education space right there. That's an area that's currently storage that they've asked to convert into a small group room, so that gives us another special education space. So this may look a little bit more like what you'll see for next year. With this model, they could hold 380 students.
So that's the 5 elementary schools. Any questions about elementary before we move into secondary spaces?
I have an observation, and I don't want to get into the weeds like I typically do. When we look at this, and thank you, by the way, for doing all this work. This is really good comprehensive work, really gives a good layout and understanding of what opportunities we have and we can provide for our students, while making sure we're leaning into our gifted and talented students, our special education students, our different needs. I think that's something that we forget to talk about. For those of us as parents who had a student that was one of the first groups of 6th graders that stayed at the elementary when this district had to make some tough choices. Our 6th graders are not engaged in some of the electives and activities that their peers are engaged in other districts and even in our own school district. Monument Academy sixth graders have a lot more opportunities that they can lean into in their buildings than we can, because we are making sure that we're sharing that building, and there's just not the space to be able to give them the things that when our group, when my student in particular, with that group of students, foreign language, sports opportunities. There's a lot of opportunities that we've had to cut to make sure that we are leaning into accommodating our K-6 students in the best way we can. So I applaud and appreciate that this work is being done, but I think we still forget that our sixth graders aren't getting the same level of sixth grade education. Core education, absolutely. We are a stellar school district, but some opportunities that they don't get to lean into that their peers do, and our families still choose to be here because of the quality of education in our buildings. So I think that that's important, that that quality education is there, but there are some things that we just can't do. So I wanted to put it out there.
That's good, and I think those conversations are good to have, because we do have to remember these kiddos do go to specials for 2 periods a day. That leaves a classroom vacant for 2 periods a day. If we needed to bring a foreign language teacher into a classroom that might have to move around a little bit in these small schools, there's opportunities to do things like that.
That's good to know.
From a space perspective.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. Okay.
Any other elementary school observations or questions?
And just because we're talking about ideal does not mean that that's the way it needs to be or is. Just because in order for us to take an underpopulated school doesn't mean we're going to just fill it up because we said that it could hold that. So there's still room for the special education programs and things like that. But if we got into a bind, we know schools can fill a little bit more in a lot of cases than where we're at. Okay, Lewis Palmer Middle School, as designed, as a 6th grade. It was designed for 3 teams per grade. And with that educational model, that gives us 9 teams, 36 classrooms, and that was a 900 student middle school. And in here, let's see, the classroom, yep. Okay. And I just gave you the academic wing because we're talking core classes. The whole rest of the building is all of the arts and bands and choirs and that kind of stuff, just out of the academic area.
Gateway to tech. That's a good example.
Yes. All right. So as they're currently using it, they are a 7-8 middle school with 3 teams per grade, and they are currently where they can accommodate 600 students with this model. And we have GT, study hall, GT, the Patriot, 2 rooms for that, multilingual, special education, lots of that upstairs and resource. Right. And I didn't calculate that in here. Right. So the same thing we were talking about, and you'll see it at the high schools. When we're calculating, there's actually a range in these schools as what they can hold, because 2 periods per day, those classrooms aren't being utilized. So we can put another 25% more kids into each one of these spaces if we needed to utilize those classrooms the entire day. It's easier at the high schools because they have pods, areas where the teachers have desks and their personal belongings versus living in their classroom with their desk there.
So if the 600 times 1.25 would be 750. And our October head count was 732.
Which, based on the way they're using this, just means they average more than 25 kids in a class. Then as we're moving into the ideal use, we could be using the 7-8 model and offering 4 teams per grade, which allows that building to hold 800 students. And that still allows for 5 rooms of special education or other programming. And so this is just a sample. I'm not necessarily saying we need to have all the special education, that kind of stuff upstairs in that corner, but it is just saying that it's there. We could utilize the building and have that designed or teachers placed however the principal needs it. But also know that up by the gymnasium, there's old locker rooms that they have converted into some special education space in addition to what you see in these. So there's a bit of room in the school. Any question on the middle school? So Palmer Ridge was originally designed as a 912 high school, and that could accommodate between 1,025 to 1,275 students. And that range is exactly what Brett was just explaining, or Brett and I, that we have 2 periods a day where the students aren't in the classrooms. And the teachers do not need to utilize the space for their desks because those little faculty areas, there's 4 of them. That's where the different grade level staff have their desks and personal items. And so this is a little bit different because it's not just a flat math, that might be a business class. And so where we're seeing that we have some designed areas that are computer or publication or business, those things could still be part of their core curriculum. So that gives a lot of wiggle room when it comes to capacity and building schedules. So this was designed with 4 special education spaces in these areas, and then we move into how they're utilizing it. And again, we have those 4 faculty areas, but they moved the special education out a little bit from the rooms that they were designed for, but outside of that, they're pretty much utilizing it the way that it was designed, and they're still within that 1025 to 1275 range for capacity. Sorry, that was just as designed. Do we know what their capacity or their enrollment was?
Their October head count was 1,067, 1067.
Yeah. All right. Any questions for Palmer Ridge? All right, our last one is Lewis Palmer High School. Again, a 912 high school design. It was designed to hold between I have numbers different here, so I apologize for that, but the 1325 to 1680 is the actual numbers for that capacity, so I apologize for the 1350 at the top. And we have different areas of academics because of the addition, so that north academic wing was the original part of the building, and then the south academic wing has an upper and lower level. That was the addition. And then as we're using it, all you're going to see are just different names in the boxes, but the utilization of space is very comparable to how it was designed. Yeah.
Do you happen to know what year the addition was? Is it like 1996 or so?
I have it in a spreadsheet.
What?
I have it in a spreadsheet.
What?
Shush.
And whom do you work for?
Somebody who has great tools.
It's quite a while. It's been over
Yeah, it has been.
20 years.
Yeah, sorry. So while I'm looking for this, is there any questions on the high schools?
The LPH October head count was 1,145.
I have a question. So I'm looking at as designed and as used for the 2 high schools. The elementary schools we showed we showed an ideal use.
Yes.
And then when we look at our 2 high schools, it's as designed. Does that mean that they're already ideally being used properly?
I think what it means is that all of the core classrooms are core classrooms. They just have them utilized for business or something labeled differently that falls into those categories. So they're still going to be core. They're still utilizing them as core. They're not throwing art into one of those classrooms. So I don't know that there's more of an ideal use. It's just going to fluctuate per principal and per need. What you will see is at Lewis Palmer High School, there are several that are not labeled in the as used because they just aren't using those classrooms. So there's space available for new classes.
And the reason I ask is with our innovation center coming online, I was curious if that affects any of this, but these are just the core classrooms, so it really does not affect
Some of those
this?
core classrooms, again, really depends on how it's gonna fit with their credits to graduate, and so they could be considered a CTE class, but they also might not be. Like a business class, I'm not sure exactly how Justin, that curriculum is set up. Engineering and that kind of stuff could still be going towards a core credit.
So keeping in mind that at this point, we're planning on juniors and seniors accessing the Career and Innovation Center. And so we would still need CTE space at both of our high schools.
How many dedicated special education spaces do we have at Lewis Palmer High School?
Let's see here, so. I'm gonna apologize off the top of my head because I was not looking at the entire building. I don't have this whole
I
building
keep
mapped
forgetting
yet.
that. I apologize. I keep forgetting that this is just the core classroom space. You're, okay. Disregard.
Okay, let's see here.
This is really good work. So next steps will be to engage with the buildings and their staff to get their feedback input. Is there something that we missed or you missed? Or is there something that, ideas or thoughts?
Yeah, and I also think especially as we're looking at this time of the year, when we're looking at the choice enrollment, when we start seeing schools that are saying, yeah, we don't have room, we need to cap this, we're gonna look at more of this kind of stuff and say, okay, let's sit down and talk about why are we capping? What can we do to help you find room if we think from this perspective that there may be some more space? So it helps us with dialogue.
Excellent.
So it looks like Lewis Palmer High School had 1997 edition and 1985 edition and was originally built in 1980.
Why did I ask that question? Because we haven't made, and it's okay, but just as a data point for us as board members, we haven't made a capital investment in our structures in a very long time. And we've continued to innovate through what we have. And so in the spirit of fiscal stewardship, it's actually been pretty good. Right? Continue to maintain a credit with distinction, continue to have a higher matriculation rate than most of our peers, and continue to have a safe environment for the staff and the students and their guests to be in without significant financial investment. Conversely, look around the state and see if you can say the same thing. That's why I asked the question. Because it's going to come up, and we need to have the facts.
Good point.
Yeah, it made me think of something.
That's scary.
Yes, should have seen a lot of smoke coming out. When do you forecast with demographics we will need to look at expansion? What kind of expansion do you see us needing? And where I'm going to ultimately is we've got a decision coming up on one of our schools, and I don't want the perception that if we decide to tear it down, are we going to turn around that same year and put something on the ballots to raise money to build another school?
Sure. Yeah, so the next steps moving forward, now that we have some capacity ranges, we can go through and I will do some graphics for you where I'm going to project student enrollment out 5 years. So we'll look at historical previous 5 years, projected 5 years, and on that graph is going to show you that building capacity so we can start seeing in those next 5 years, or we're going to start broaching that. So that give us a timeline a little bit on when we need to start addressing some things, whether they be additions or boundary changes or whatever that's going to look like. Those conversations can happen. In the meantime, all the kids get geocoded, and what that means is every child in the district is going to be a dot on the map based on where they're enrolled. It'll have data behind it. It's a database, so I can turn on all sixth graders and see where they live. We can tell a lot by where they're choicing what that intra-district movement is. But the bigger thing I can do is I will be drawing in all of the parcels of land the developers intend to develop. And those will do student generation rates per area. So I will look at existing houses, how many kids that tends to generate at elementary, middle, and high school level. And then what that's going to allow us to do is look at those homes that are coming online. How many students is that neighborhood going to develop? And we're going to look at the rate of sales over time. And we'll figure out if we're seeing an average of 5 home sales a month, we're going to target that. And I'm going to give you a heat map on what looks like this year is going to explode, what's going to be a little bit slower. So we'll have an idea of, is it Bear Creek that's going to be impacted? Is it Palmer Lake Elementary? And how fast? So we'll be able to start taking a lot of that information and utilizing to answer your questions. It just takes me a little bit to build it because the district doesn't have anything yet. So that's my next task.
So that's a little more complex piece of work than this, right?
Yes.
By a magnitude of 6 or 10.
Yeah.
But Chris brings up a good question. And how much of this work did you do in your previous job?
All of it.
Okay.
Yep.
Over how many years?
17.
Okay. So once you had, to Brett's point earlier with the employee survey, once you had the right foundational data, let's call it 3 years, to really give you a fair swath, how long did it take to be in a position to really be able to accurately understand the dynamics and the trends and make some predictions that were pretty safe? Because we don't have the foundational data, right?
Yeah, the foundational data is the hard part. Once it's put together, calculating it on an annual basis is pretty fast, and we'll
Right.
get into a cycle where I can just have it ready for
Right.
board meetings and
It's
populate
like loading
it.
software.
Exactly. Right now, we're building the software.
But how many years did it take you to get to a point to where you almost organically knew what was going to happen?
Oh my goodness. You know, it's an interesting question because I don't know that that was ever really asked of me. And so
It
it
will
just
be here.
gradually, well, it just gradually came over time, and then it got to be nice to just have the data because people really enjoyed having the data. So the actual building just took a period of time just to start doing. I think I can so I already have all of the parcel data and all of the birth data in the district of existing. So now it's just building the new. And I think over the next year, maybe 2,
Yeah.
I can generate something pretty good and accurate.
Yep. Well, that would be fantastic. The whole reason we're doing this is A, it's the right level of diligence, and B, we also ask for some asset utilization, metrics, data, and information, right? And this is the foundational element for us to get there. And Chris, to your thought and point, if you just, as painful it was for Mr. Ridgway to give us the October counts, thank you for doing it, right? If you look at the differences between the tenancy in the buildings and the capacity in the buildings, and we haven't yet layered in what makes educational sense, which is the most important piece, is it may be much easier for us to modify than construct new, or even a combination, right? Maybe we build an annex if we need to, because it's the right facility where all the right employees are going to stay anyways 80% of the time, et cetera, et cetera. And at least it drives a degree of agility, which we saw one of the schools was managing that agility pretty well, right?
Absolutely.
And if we can have that, we're in such a tight geographic area that it's pretty logical for us. And then if we layer in some foundational facts.
And though it'll take me a couple of years to get everything really solid, I can focus on our hot points. So if our development in our Bear Creek neighborhood is going to be the area where we're going to see a lot of growth, I'll focus on that. We'll kind of get an idea of what that turnover is going to look like as far as the residential development.
Thank you for the professional work.
Sure.
Excellent work. There was some work back when I got on eons ago, 2017, where we were really digging into what is our developments? What's coming online? What do we foresee in our schools? And I was looking at this table, and I think the only other person sitting at this table that would probably be able to recall that is Mr. Frampton. But Cheryl Wagaman would regularly share some updates on when we'd have a neighborhood coming online, and it included, are we going to see impact fees or land? And it was able to, it helped us to make some decisions. Whether those decisions were the right decisions or not, don't know. But really having that value, there's so much value in knowing how to look ahead, 5 years ahead of where we're going to be. And it's not an exact science. I can't imagine it would be. But I am so appreciative that we have you on this team to be able to lean into that.
Thank you. Yeah, so if I get where I want to be, I can do a 50-year build-out map for the district that will be in 5-year increments. And so we can look at that, and it would adjust all the way along as things change, developments come online, they go bankrupt, whatever that looks like. And so that's my goal.
Excellent. Great work.
Thanks.
There's a lot of information to absorb here. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions?
My brain is blowing up a little bit, you don't always know what's needed, in our roles, what's needed, and I'm just so grateful that you're here.
Oh, thank you.
so that these things that people like us just don't understand can at least be thought through our heads a little bit. So it's just, thank you.
I'm always the one to open the can of worms, right? So here we go. Back to my previous question about elementary schools and opportunities for 6th grade. If we're still continuing with the model that we have now, that we've been in since 2010, what does a team partnership look like to reopen opportunities for our students? And if I recall, again, without opening a huge can of worms here and now, there was 2 roadblocks that we had to pivot to the opportunities we had for our 6th graders. A was the availability of staff, and B was the availability of space. And I don't know, that's just from my brief recollection. So in a team atmosphere, who would be engaged in that conversation if we were to be able to dream and be able to do the right thing for our 6th graders? Who would be engaged in that conversation?
Well, I think we're all just kind of looking, thank you, first of all, for bringing that up. I hear about this periodically in my first 6 months here around 6th grade and the changes that were made, and not even realizing until you said that. It was in 2010 that change was made, and that was made from my understanding, for some reasons around space and just different opportunity. And so there's pros and cons with both sides. I think certainly if it was the wish and the will of the board for us to engage in that conversation moving forward, what would the impact be on building space, on personnel, looking at that construct and rearranging. Certainly there's opportunity to do so, but there will definitely be dominoes and impact. So I mean, it would really be all of our cabinet team along with community engaged, our more community engaged, our principal leadership, teachers at that would be a good undertaking for us to discuss and further engage in, if that was, again, a direction that we wanted to go in. But there would be some work entailed in that, and we would want to get a lot of collaborative, headspace into that conversation and moving in that direction. So that again, 30,000-foot level, that's what we would need to look at.
And I want to make sure that it's clear. I'm not, as one board member, saying we should undertake this work right now.
Sure.
It was more, again, I don't want to open a can of worms, and you guys have so much on your plates right now. It was not it was more when we're looking to the future, not the here and now, obviously, but when we're dreaming about and thinking about future goals and future plans, at what point do we engage in that and what does that look like? But I'm not saying we do this in this school year or certainly not next school year. There's a lot to be done right now and a lot of work that is ahead of all of you. It was just something that I thought about as we're thinking long-term.
Definitely.
In 5 years. If we're dreaming about 5 years from now, what can we do to make sure that we are providing the best opportunities for our kids while we're doing that? So that was,
Yeah.
again, I apologize. I know I potentially opened a can of worms, but it was just something that,
I was also thinking about that too. Do we want to move? I mean, I think that's the first thing. Do we want to move to 6, 7, 8 as our middle school model? And what does that mean? What does that mean for our capacity, for what we just looked at? You know, and I don't have a dog in the fight, and I'm not thinking through that. I'm just wondering what you guys think. Is that something we want?
Well, I guess I would say that, you know, this is a kind of a topically a good example of something that would kind of slice through many of our strategic plan priorities, right? And so it's an example of, well, if this is a topic we want to pursue, how do we fold it into that structure of conversation about, well, there's definitely an academic success to it, there's a facility angle to it, there's a financial angle to it. And so that kind of topic would have a good opportunity to cross so many of those boundaries to have a good, complete conversation.
I think it would be important to know what our customers, our students, and our families want, and if that's a priority for them or not.
Do you have some idea about that? Are we?
I mean, we hear things anecdotally, but we have not, since I have been here, done a formal study on that.
One thing that I liked that Tiffany brought up was the idea of what could we do without removing the sixth grade from the buildings to make the sixth grade experience a little more like a middle school experience. And I think that coming up potentially with ideas around that could keep the enrollment where it needs to be. Palmer Lake and Kilmer are quite small, so if you were to pull all those sixth graders out, it would really shrink their student bodies down considerably. But just a thought, I think that it would be well worth discussing what we could do to change up the sixth grade experience a little bit. And having worked at one of the buildings, I do think that would be something that people would be excited to talk about.
again, not in the immediate, but yeah, I think.
And I suspect there are places in the country where that's already happening. And we could probably learn some things.
Yeah. Thank you so much for leaning into that and at least hearing me out when I process through. I'm a verbal processor, so. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you all for all the information and everything that you guys brought to the table. This was really good, robust discussion. Any further comments or questions on this particular topic before we move on?
I'm just going to say that I sent a spreadsheet to you all that has the numbers all in one place, and I also uploaded it to Board Docs here. So here is the kind of the conclusions, if you will, from all that, and then I added a couple of variance calculation columns over at the side.
Awesome, right there in front of you, Mr. Schwartz.
Is there a pivot table associated with this?
No pivot table. I don't believe in pivot tables. I don't survive, right?
I just want to say thank you also that with the quality of information that you guys are giving us to make it easier to think through these things, because without that information, you know, someone on the outside can't. So I get it. It's a lot of work, and I hope that it also helps you guys think through the information, because otherwise, if it's just for us, it's, you know, it's a lot of work. It's just really, you know, I feel like I've learned more in this last year than I have in many other years. And it's truly necessary for us Otherwise, you're just throwing darts.
Thank you, I appreciate that, and, and it's the whole mantra of informed decision-making, and informed decisions are easier decisions.
They are,
A hard decision is usually because there's some type of information lacking.
right.
Right.
And you can never have all the information, but you can have enough where you can make a good decision.
Okay. Good work. Good work, team. Okay, so we are now moving on to our next agenda item of our special meeting, which is our executive session regarding our superintendent evaluation, which requires a motion.
I would like to propose a motion to convene an executive session, discuss a personal matter, superintendent's performance evaluation in accordance with Colorado Revised Statute 24-6-402, parentheses 4FI.
Seconded.
And the board will invite Dr. Dattery to join us in executive session in the superintendent's office, and then following the executive session, there will be no further school district business that will be discussed in the meeting. Will be adjourned. Is there any further discussion before we vote? No? All right. Ms. Wood?
Mr. Brown?
Aye.
Mr. Norris?
Fine.
Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Dr. Shanks?
Aye.
Ms. Upchurch?
Aye. Okay. Thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay warm, and Happy New Year 2025.
Some light reading.